What's up everybody, I'm HoopsandHipHop. So we're just about a week out now from Halloween, and throughout the month we've been talking a lot about ghost-type Pokemon. However, I am here to tell you today that ghost Pokemon aren't actually ghosts.
Whoa, hang on, Hoops, you can't just make such a big claim about the Pokemon world like that. You better have some evidence, my friend.
Oh, I definitely have some evidence, no need to worry about that. But since you're already here, would you want to help me explain this theory to the lovely people?
Oh, I'd love to, but how can you be so confident? Ghost Pokemon are clearly ghosts. I mean, just look at them. They're ghosts.
Well, it's actually the appearance of one ghost type in particular that really seals the deal on this theory.
Oh, and who would that be?
Alolan Marowak. Think about it. Alolan Marowak is part ghost type in reference to the ghost of the mother Marowak from Pokemon Red and Blue. But if we compare the two side by side, it's clear that they are not one and the same. The ghost of the mother Marowak is quite literally a ghost, or a spirit per se, that hasn't been able to move on due to how it was murdered by Team Rocket. This is especially evident in Pokemon Origins, and if we compare that to Alolan Marowak, who is labeled as part ghost type, it just doesn't add up because one is clearly dead while the other is clearly not.
That really does make sense, and for that matter, I guess Arceus wouldn't create a Pokemon undead. I mean, think about it, you're god of the Pokemon universe, and you're like, cool, we'll make some creatures of fire, water, grass, and dead. Let's just make them dead from the get-go. Just seems a little bit counterintuitive, you know? And also think about all the Pokemon that hatch as ghost Pokemon from an egg when you breed them. What, are they just born dead? That makes no sense.
Exactly. Between those two pieces of evidence, I think it's pretty clear that the Pokemon we have known as ghost types aren't actually ghosts. But then that brings up another question. If they're not ghosts, then what exactly are they?
Okay, well then I think the answer might well lie in the first ghost Pokemon. Chronologically speaking, that would be Giratina, and like we said earlier, it doesn't really make sense for Arceus to create a Pokemon dead from the get-go. So how about this? Giratina wasn't a ghost from the get-go, and it gained that typing through the weird properties of the Distortion world. It gained the typing after being sent there.
However, this is where we need to address the label of ghost. Despite becoming a ghost type, we don't believe that Giratina actually died when it went to the Distortion world. Instead, we believe that Giratina's type was changed based on its presence in the Distortion world. The Distortion world is said to be representative of antimatter, which is a real thing in our world. Antimatter is essentially the opposite of matter, where everything is constructed of the same molecules except with an opposite charge to its normal matter counterpart. And since the Distortion world is essentially an opposite world to the regular living world of Pokemon, what might it be described as? Well, a world of death.
Yes, I suppose that would make sense as to why the ghost type is labeled the way it is, and not only that, one of the key areas that's a portal between our world and the Distortion world is Turnback Cave, which, according to Giratina's Pokédex entries, is described as being an ancient cemetery. Now tell me, if you were a Pokemon trainer walking about an ancient cemetery and then you saw this big black portal open up and creatures coming out of it, you might assume they'd be ghosts. Hence where they'd get the classification and the name. And the final bit of the puzzle here are that many ghost Pokemon are described as coming from another dimension. Gengar is just one. Dusknoir supposedly can eat things up with its belly and send it to the spirit world. The only spirit world we've seen in the show, by the way, looks an awful lot like the Distortion world. So not only can they open up their own little portals, if they're coming from the portal in Turnback Cave, that explains why they would be given this classification, the ghost type.
This honestly makes perfect sense, and it continues to once we reclassify what exactly that ghost type is. Since they are coming from the Distortion world, it would be more appropriate to refer to them as the antimatter type, since that is what the Distortion world is made of. This also fits in nicely with the other types since many of them are based around elements such as fire, ground, rock, water, ice, heck, even flying type is more or less of an air type, which is an elemental compound itself. So the concept of an antimatter type actually makes a lot more sense than it might seem at first.
Okay, so I think we've explained everything pretty clearly here. The ghost types aren't really the ghost type, they're the antimatter type, and they get that because they were born or they come from the Distortion world and then travel here through Turnback Cave or other similar portals, and they've become known as the ghost type because Turnback Cave is a giant cemetery. The only thing I feel like we haven't covered is Pokemon that are like part ghost type that are still definitely from the natural world, like Oricorio for example. Now that gets the ghost typing as part of a form change, so if all the ghost Pokemon are from the Distortion world in some way or another, how would that work with Pokemon like Oricorio?
Well, more or less, it comes from the exposure to the antimatter that makes them this way. As the more traditional ghost or antimatter types come here from the distortion world, it's possible that bits and pieces of the distortion world could also float through these portals, and exposure to this antimatter is what causes these Pokemon to change type. Oricorio is a good example of this because it becomes a ghost type when it is exposed to purple nectar, a nectar which comes from Pony Island, which also just so happens to house portals to other dimensions from time to time.
And another interesting thing to note here is that these antimatter Pokemon or ghost type Pokemon may be antimatter versions of creatures in our world. We've all heard the theory a million times that Gengar is Clefable's shadow, Clefable being our world's version and Gengar being the version that manifested in the distortion world. And also, you take Pokemon that are said to be dead humans, like Phantumps or Yamask, potentially a person goes missing in our world. Maybe they've fallen through a portal to the distortion world and become those Pokemon there, or potentially something to do with the horror of them dying manifests itself as a being in the distortion world as one of these ghost Pokemon. Which also helps connect the idea that the distortion world and the spirit world are one and the same. Actually, this whole theory makes me think of ghost Pokemon differently, and in particular there is one I'm thinking about in relation to another Pokemon theory.
Oh yeah? Which one's that?
Yeah, or the one about Haunter and Voltorb. You know, Voltorb being a possessed Pokeball by a Haunter. I mean, it kinda makes sense, but I think we could come up with something way better over on my channel.
Sure, that sounds great. Really quick before I head over to Toby's channel though, go ahead and give the video a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you're new for more Pokemon content every week. Just to let you guys know, I've also got a new album coming up for release on iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify in the next couple weeks. It'll have all my best remixes from the past year, plus one you haven't even heard yet. It comes out November 3rd, and any support you guys can give me on that would be absolutely amazing. Anyway, I don't want to be late for Toby's video, so I'll catch you guys over there, and until the next one, I'll smell you guys later.